Yep, does it work? Oh, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, thanks for the invite. I'm head of logistics Europe at TH Real Estate. TH Real Estate is the property business of Nuveen. Nuveen is $1 trillion asset manager globally, and TH Real Estate is roughly managing 100 billion of assets across the globe on behalf of our institutional investors. Talking about logistics here, we roughly have 9 billion across the globe. We manage, but this is only logistics. And talking about e-commerce, we are also talking about retail and changes for retail. So in that respect, we are affected in two ways, because we manage a lot of retail, and we also want to benefit from the growth story we just heard, rental growth, and also diversification from an investor's perspective by buying logistics.
Okay, good. Tim.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Davies. I coordinate the activities of all the teams that deal in logistics and industrial across EMEA for Colliers International Global Players. In terms of the specialists we have working in Europe, it's almost 150 who are dealing specifically in industrial and logistics out of 60 different offices. In terms of activity, we would argue at the moment that as far as sectors goes, that the industrial and logistics is driving our business, both in terms of the occupiers and also the investment.
Great. Christian.
I'm Christian Bischoff, founder and managing director of LLI Projects. The name is Program, it's Logistics and Light Industrial. In earlier years, I built also an e-commerce warehouse for Amazon in Leipzig, so that's probably why I'm here on the chair.
Great. Dirk.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dirk Sosef, and I work at Prologis. Within Prologis, I oversee the European Research and Strategy Department. I hope you all know Prologis. Prologis is an investor in only logistics real estate across the globe. Here in Europe, we own roughly 17 million square meters across the biggest European markets. E-commerce, important driver for our market, important demand driver. Just to share already one statistic, 5 years ago, e-commerce new leasing was around 5% in our portfolio. Today, it's around 20%. But no, please note that the other 80% is still from the other sectors. So e-commerce is one driver of logistics real estate, in my view.
Okay, great. And Vanessa, can just let me know, in terms of M&G, what kind of part does logistics play within your sort of portfolio of investments?
So our core open-ended fund is 10% invested in logistics, which is very much in line with the risk guidelines. So we've hit the maximum, and it's also very much in line with the investable universe as well. So it's a reflection of the investable universe.
Okay, good. I want to pick up with you, Dirk, actually. What you mentioned there is e-commerce being now 20%, did you say, of that? And how much are you expecting that to grow? Obviously, because you've got a global business, you're presumably picking up research from the US or Asia or from elsewhere. What are you expecting that growth to be in terms of e-commerce?
Oh, the market will grow much faster. What's interesting, when you think about e-commerce, we talk already for a couple of years about it. Please know that we are still in its early phases of growth. In the last 5 years, e-commerce doubled, but this growth will continue. So within our portfolio, we continue to see strong demand by the e-commerce sector, and that's because different markets in Europe are in different stages of growth with e-commerce. As Vanessa is saying, with the digitalization, we really see differences across Europe. So UK, most mature market, a lot of e-commerce demand. Well, for instance, Italy, Poland are really picking up in terms of e-commerce growth, but those markets are really in the first wave of the e-commerce growth.
Okay, good. And Thorsten, in terms of, let's say, we had a session on retail earlier, and there was a lot of discussion about that, which was that actually it's becoming more about omni-channel. Do you see it as logistics versus retail, or do you see e-commerce as kind of part of, I guess, just a different way of shopping, rather than them necessarily fighting it to a bitter death? What's your sort of sense on the retail versus e-commerce side?
Yeah, perhaps it's not that easy right now, and perhaps in future even less, to clearly say where's the line between e-commerce and normal retail. because that omni-channel trend. So we see online retailers coming back to the cities, trying to establish their certain link, because online e-commerce shopping is quite difficult as well. So the online traders see that there is a little loyalty between customers and the shops. So if you don't like how you've been treated in your order, you just simply swap over to the next one. So you don't have any physical contact. The only contact you have is the courier bringing the parcel to you. So I think we're going to see more online traders coming back to the city to create some experience, to get some touch with the customer. And on the other side, we're going to see more and more retailers becoming more omni-channel as well. So we see a lot of click and collect, for example. So you order and you pick it up at the store. So is it online? Is it a store? What kind of business is it? And also to stress what you just said, Dirk, we still see in our portfolio quite a lot of industrial supply chain. That's not going to change. But all the rest, which is B2B and B2C, it will somehow diminish the line between it. So we're going to see big hubs from which you ship to stores, from which you ship to other business partners, or directly to the customer. So it's quite difficult for us to assess, although I fully agree that we're going to see more and more of that or of that impact of the online shopping.
Yeah, I think the relationship between offline and online is becoming more and more blurred. But I think we need to understand that there's been a societal change in the way that we shop, and the e-commerce is driving that. And if you look at the attractiveness of e-commerce, it's about speed, it's about the ease of actual shopping, it's the choice of shopping. And if you look at our millennials now who are now come of age, they are really, really impatient about the way they shop, in that they want something delivered and they want it delivered now. So I think from a retailer's point of view, and if you're looking at physical shopping, then they're really reinventing themselves and how they go about their offer. And there has to be a seamless delivery in terms of the way they offer the shopping experience. And that's at every touch along the way.
Christian, you would?
Yeah, I live near Düsseldorf. And there you see something very attractive in e-commerce, that's same-day delivery. And I think that's an important aspect of the whole thing. When you really can order until 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you get it at 7, that's super. I mean, I forgot to shop a present and had the chance to get it within 5 hours. And so the evening was great after that. You know, that's such a strong driver for e-commerce that I think this is something we will see in Germany much more. That everywhere where same day is a possibility, e-commerce is driven very, very strongly.
Okay, good. And just in terms of let's pick up some of the trends, Dirk, that you're seeing. There's obviously a lot of discussion about that sort of, in order to get that kind of delivery, whether it's drones, whether it's increased technology driving those things, how many of those things do you think will be reality, and how many of those things do you think will simply be, they're kind of a thought for the moment, but which ones do you think actually in terms of the supply chain will we start to see from the research you've been doing?
Tricky one. I think one of the biggest drivers or changes, disruptors we see right now in the market is, and that's only one, and I can talk next hour about this, but I think it's not what you want. But no, one of the biggest drivers we see is, for instance, when you think about data and how our customers use data, and even how we within Prologis use data. We did together with Oxford Economics a study about the value of goods flowing through our warehouses. And on a global level, the total value of goods flowing through a warehouse is equal to the GDP of Canada. So each year, the GDP of Canada flows through warehouses. And what we are trying to do within Prologis is get a better understanding of this flow of goods. And our customers, e-commerce customers, are doing exactly the same with data. They want to get a better understanding about what's happening with their flows of goods. Then you get a much more agile supply chain because you have a better insight about what's happening, within your supply chains. Then the key value driver becomes time to bring the goods to the customer. So I think that will be a disruptor, this data. time to bring the goods to the customer will become even more important. Therefore, being located at the right locations, and not only close to population centers, but close to labor, close to parcel hubs, is a very important driver of location decisions.
And Christian, I mean, we mentioned earlier, Dirk mentioned earlier that it's 20% at the moment, and that's looking to grow. How do you see that? I mean, for sure, it may be only 20%, but is it the biggest driver at the moment, e-commerce, or is it just that there's also, a pickup in terms of, let's say, German GDP and activity that's also going to be driving more activity into the logistics sector generally?
In Germany, the biggest driver of the economy, of the growth of the economy, is inland consumption. And I want to say one thing. A problem we have in Germany especially is availability of labor force. I mean, you want to be in e-commerce, you want to be in the core markets, you want to be, in the good locations. But you see, we have various areas where unemployment rate is below 4%, meaning that basically people that should work in such centers are simply not available. So I think what companies do is a multi-channel strategy, and they try to ship it to the customers however, if that's really e-commerce, or if it's through stores, or if it's through other channels, because you simply don't have a chance. So that's why I think one key problem we have to solve, or key challenge, is to get the right workforce in the right locations to drive e-commerce.
Okay, so in some ways that's, do pick that up, Tim.
I was just going to say, in terms of the importance of e-commerce from a European perspective, GDP is, give or take, 18 trillion euros per year. At the moment, or certainly last year's figures, e-commerce contributed 3% of that. Within the next 2 years, that's perceived to be doubling to 6%. So it will have a massive impact. And research that was carried out by Barclays fairly recently said that in the UK, 25% of all shopping is done online, but by 2024, I think that's going to be 50%. So the impact is going to be significant, and will have a significant impact on the property industry as well.
Okay, good. And Thorsten, just picking up some of the things from Vanessa's presentation there about that this may actually be one of the only sectors where the European Union is positively, through infrastructure and those kinds of things, actually giving it soft support. How much of that do you think is going to be a useful driver in terms of the sector? And also for you, in terms of the pricing, have you seen a significant change? How easy or more difficult is it as a core investor to be able to invest at the moment?
Yeah, perhaps there are a couple of questions in that one question, to be honest. Perhaps to start with one with the slides we've seen. As an investor, we've seen in the past that there's not really rental growth. Every time that there was a slight pickup in rents, the logistics firms tend to move just 10 kilometers outside the city in order to avoid that rental development. So what we think is now fundamentally different is the availability of staff, as we heard from Christian, and also the availability of land. So the logistics firms cannot move out of the city any further because you have to be in a certain distance. Let's say 50 kilometers, that's the day tour you can do to your customers in the city and back. So they cannot move out any further, so they have to accept a higher rent, which we like as an investor. Furthermore, you compete with all other asset classes, so you see some rental development, otherwise you won't get the plot. So that's what we definitely like, and what is helping a lot in order to sell quite a keen yield, which we currently see in the market. I mean, every asset class is hot, and the prices are quite high. But for logistics, we see that combination of sustainable trends, so e-commerce driving it, industries driving it, that plots have a certain value because you cannot reproduce the good everywhere. And we see that in the Netherlands, in the Nordics, in Germany, the pricing is reflecting all of that trend. So it's all factored in, basically. You don't get anything for free anymore. What we don't have it, or we don't have it in the same way in Southern Europe, where we see e-commerce still in single-digit numbers and growth numbers now picking up, but it's not almost there where we are in Germany and in the Nordics. So this is an area where we definitely will spend more because we see that is all still to come, and currently the yields are not fully reflecting that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's because, and I agree, because rents in Europe are still quite depressed. And that's interesting when you think about the market fundamentals, which are very strong. So you have strong market fundamentals but depressed rents. And I think that will be the key value opportunity in the future. These low rents, below prior peak, will rise because market vacancy is low and the overall market fundamentals are strong and the drivers are strong as well. So in the last years we saw a lot of cap rate compression. That was the key value driver for a sector. But now, as the cycle continues, I expect that rent growth will be a much stronger value driver for a sector.
Okay, and that's being driven by these e-commerce trends in essence.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's just the pure fundamentals of the market. It's supply and demand. And as Thorsten said, we've got a finite supply of land in the immediate area where logistics is strong and needs to be. And all that will happen at the end of the day is with that lack of supply, it'll drive rental growth. We're predicting that it's going to be across Europe.
Okay, good. And Christian, I mean, I noticed that it involves light industrial as well as logistics. Is that based on the fact that light industrial is often kind of more urban, and therefore those kinds of sites tend to lend themselves more to this kind of last mile delivery sort of strategy? Is that what that's based on? I don't want to give away your investment secrets, but...
No, when I was at another conference, I really realized in a discussion that the yield difference between light industrial and logistics is huge. Also because the building standards are completely different. I mean, if you're in downtown Berlin and want to do e-commerce or delivery, then you normally have old buildings. If you would renew them, you don't get the industry zoning again, because they would the town would change it to resi or to office or whatever, and would tell you to move out. So the buildings are old, they are have high heating costs, and so on and so on. And this is basically what light industrial currently shows. However, in the big cities, it's still in big usage for e-commerce. Now, I think the solution can only be to move e-commerce buildings into building standards that are according to logistics and very near to town centers, but not in town centers. More efficient, more cost efficient, more delivery efficiency. So this is what we're seeing. The other aspect we have in our name also is, of course, that in Germany are so many production companies which are still in town locations. Like in Berlin, you still have the old island thinking, and so a lot of production can go outside, and today production is also material flow, and this is why this is also good for logistics, and this is interesting as a value driver for investment companies who want to buy.
Okay, good.
I was just going to say, I think perhaps an interesting way to look at the impact of urbanization and the fact that we do need in-town e-commerce opportunities. Last week I was listening to a conference, I was in America with a conference, and there was the director of real estate for Macy's. Macy's are one of the leading departmental stores in America, and he suggested that shopping malls in the States may reduce in number over the next 10 years from 3,000 to 1,000, which shows the impact of e-commerce. And I just wonder whether, with the opportunity, what's going to happen to that use? Is that an opportunity for mixed use in terms of logistics, taking over some of these shopping malls? Is there an opportunity for mixed use in terms of residential coming alongside and sitting happily with logistics as well? I just wonder what Vanessa thought about that.
I'm picking up on the urbanization, absolutely. I think we live in a world where I think US and Europe both have 70% of the population living in urban centres. But when it comes to modern logistics per capita, I think Europe just has a third versus the US, so there's definitely a supply of stock that needs to be come in. But the question is, would I turn shopping centres into resi? Is that right?
I just think going forward, there's the opportunity for a mixed use in terms of logistics. And previously, logistics and residential have been polarised from a planning perspective, but going forward is the opportunity for a mixed use going to be logistics and residential.
Yeah, so absolutely. Coming back to the point of, at the moment, US and Europe, both 70% of the population live in urban centres, well, that's going to go up to 85%. I think by 2050, and that's going to have in turn an impact on scarcity of land. So absolutely. It might have to be mixed with mixed use. Then you get a question of height and things like that, but that's a different story.
Christian, you wanted to pick that up?
Yeah, if you see the land costs for shopping malls and for logistics, then there's a huge difference. So if you have a situation in the US that really from 3,000 shopping centers down to 1,000, then of course you may have situations where current owners are forced to sell, which makes it possible for near center locations of former shopping center to be remodeled into logistics. But normally when we do logistics developments and we try to compete against retail, we always lose, because they can pay double or 3 times the land prices we could pay.
Okay, good. Yeah.
May I pick up, because when we talk about US and the shopping center and stores closing, we read it's all over the press basically. But what I would like to say is it will probably not be the same in Europe, because if you see the numbers of shopping center space per capita in US compared with Europe, it's not nearly anywhere the same number. So there is probably a bit of obsolescence in US, and it's a healthy process to change that. In Europe, we don't have that. However, if we see that some of the retail shop turnover gets lost or transferred to online, then what we could see in terms of conversion is that we see some ring road supermarkets, which perhaps you don't need 3, 2 are enough. They're still convenient, and the least convenient one could be converted into a logistics, so-called micro hub, because that's a problem which we all see to come in the future. If we see the volume of parcels growing, the logistics firms cannot drive into the city on a daily basis, bring all those parcels to several stops and come back. They have to be basically in the inner city. They have to get it overnight because, for example, Paris has 300 kilometers of traffic jam in peak times. That needs to be solved somehow, and those micro hubs are a certain solution to it, because we are then in the inner city, so we can get rid of obsolescent retail space by putting logistics in. But that's still to come, I would say.
And that's what you, in a way, I agree, because I think as well the whole sustainability trends we see in the market, and it's of course very important for the logistics sector with the clean energy. You can move with your logistics sector closer to the population markets, because you have cleaner energy. And about the micro hubs and the flow of goods, I was surprised when I talked with a colleague a couple of weeks ago. In the UK, you have the Heathrow Express, and then when you out of the tunnel at a certain point on the right, you see Colliers Park, and that's Colliers Heathrow Hayes. And there you see a small Amazon hub. That building gets full and empty at least twice a day. Full and empty at least twice a day for the goods entering London. So there's a lot going on in the market, and the market needs to find a solution to get those goods easier and faster and more efficient to the end consumer.
Okay, good. I wanted to pick up one thing with you, Thorsten, in terms of for a core investor, how easy is it to pick up? I mean, if we see a strategy for these smaller inner city urban areas, for the smaller last mile delivery kind of ones, how easy is that for a core investor where really you're looking for significant lot sizes? Does that mean you're kind of out of the market for this type of investment?
It's always much easier to stand and watch the trends go by, see people finding the solutions, and then buy the final solution. That's probably lasting too long. We want to participate in that. But if you're talking about those micro hubs or multi-story, I think it really depends how much we believe in the third user capability or the characteristics of that new scheme. So we see a lot of the logistics firms still in a test mode. We see multi-story, we see concrete mezzanines, we see all kinds of high base and auto store. We think there are already schemes where you have a 12-meter height, you put an auto store in, and you can remove it whenever you want to, and then you can use it for other purposes. That's something we already do and what we like. 2-story, yes, we have them in the portfolio. Would we do a 12-story logistics like we have in Hong Kong? If it's somewhere in Berlin, probably not. And if you're talking about small micro hubs, yes, that's something we'd like to do. But frankly speaking, we're talking about pretty small lot sizes. So it has to be a standardized good. It has to work for more than just one logistics firm or courier service. But if that is given, we could do packages, for example, and then it's something we like because we like the location.
So what do you see as the biggest trend for e-commerce, and what does that make you think of in terms of an opportunity? Let's start with you, Thorsten. So big trend, and what does that mean in terms of where you see the opportunities in the current investment market?
Yeah, as I stressed before, I see the biggest trend in the southern countries. Southern Europe, we always said it's a cultural thing and they probably won't do online shopping. We now see that picking up, and I think we can clearly say it will grow to a certain number. So we want to be early, and this is where we can benefit because yields are pretty high compared to Northern Europe, and there's not much of institutional space. So if you buy the best buildings there, you're going to benefit from that development.
Great. Tim?
I think probably going back to what Vanessa was saying in terms of the digital impact and in particular the increased penetration of the internet. I think if you look at those countries where the internet is not particularly strong at the moment, then I think there'll be phenomenal growth there. As an example, Turkey has only 50% internet use at the moment. Massive population in Turkey. They will grab hold of the internet. They will start buying online. E-commerce will become big news there. So put aside any of the political issues, and I'm a gambler. I'd invest in Turkey.
Okay, good. Christian?
Same day. You see it here in Munich. Amazon has started it. They don't trust their parcel deliveries. They do it on themselves. They start delivering twice a day. I mean, that's so good that you really start thinking of going into the jammed inner city and instead just order. And I think this is the real killer application for stationary retail. And I think this will be the big story in the next years.
Okay, great. Doug?
Why am I always last, Richard, in this line? But the biggest trend, I agree, it's about same day, let's say, next day, but bringing the goods as quickly as possible to your consumer. And what that means is that markets which are infill today will become even more infill in the future. And markets which are close to the population centers will become infill in the future. And in general, when you look at infill markets, those markets enjoy quite a good rent premium on logistics assets. So therefore I say infill, same day delivery, next day delivery.
Okay, good. Vanessa?
I guess I have to back up my study and say the opportunities going forward are in C and southern markets. I also think that there's a lack of supply. And I also think that the millennials, their spending power is underrated because they haven't quite reached the peak of their income yet. So in 10 years, we'll only see more demand from them. So I'm fairly positive about that. As a researcher, I have to look 10, 15, 20 years forward. So I was wondering whether maybe the risk to that, the other flip of the coin, is maybe things like 3D printing, whether there'll be one day where we won't need logistics anymore because we'll just shop online and print our goods at home.